Massive stones aligned with stars reveal ancient secrets we are only now understanding. This video uncovers the hidden blueprints behind wonders like the pyramids and stone temples, showing you the sophisticated planning that turned incredible visions into stone. You will learn how ancient builders encoded astronomical knowledge and cultural values into monuments that have stood for thousands of years. How did they achieve such precision without any modern tools? And what forgotten principles allowed these structures to withstand millennia? What does our modern world overlook about the intelligence of the past ancient builders? Began with a deep, intuitive relationship to the landscape itself. They did not fight the forces of nature but worked with them, using principles we are only now fully appreciating. These foundational engineering concepts were not written in complex textbooks, but were born from generations of observation and refined through practical experience. The very first step was always understanding the materials at hand. Builders selected specific types of stone not just for their appearance, but for their inherent strength and ability to withstand immense pressure over centuries. They knew which rocks could bear the most weight and which were best for intricate carving, creating a perfect marriage of form and function. This empirical knowledge extended to the invisible forces acting upon their creations. Long before the science of seismology existed, ancient engineers developed methods to make their structures resilient against earthquakes. They used flexible foundations, interlocking blocks that could shift and settle without collapsing, and clever weight distribution to dissipate vibrational energy. Similarly, they studied wind patterns, designing shapes and openings that would allow gusts to flow around a monument rather than battering it into dust. Every aspect of the environment, from the angle of the sun to the intensity of seasonal rains, was considered a vital part of the architectural blueprint. How did they move and place stones weighing dozens of tons with such astonishing accuracy? The answer lies in a patient, systematic process of trial and error that evolved into perfected technique. They mastered the use of levers, rollers, and ramps, understanding the physics of friction and mechanical advantage. They developed incredibly durable mortars, some even stronger than the stones they bonded, using locally sourced materials whose recipes are still a mystery today. And for achieving those perfect alignments to the stars or the solstice sun, they relied on simple yet profoundly effective tools like sighting poles, water levels, and the consistent movement of celestial bodies. This was not magic, but a sophisticated application of accumulated wisdom, a hidden blueprint for building eternity that was passed down through the ages. The night sky was far more than a spectacle to ancient builders. It was a dynamic, living map. They observed that the cosmos operated with a regularity that the chaotic Earth did not, a perfect clockwork of stars and planets. This reliability made the heavens the most trustworthy blueprint imaginable. In Egypt, the three Great Pyramids at Giza are a terrestrial mirror of the three stars in Orion's belt, a deliberate act of aligning their pharaohs with the gods in the afterlife. Across the sea, the massive stones of Stonehenge frame the rising sun on the summer solstice, marking a pivotal moment in the year with breathtaking accuracy. These were not just symbolic gestures, they were functional, integrated systems. A temple aligned to the solstice sunrise did not just honor a sun god, it told the people precisely when to plant their crops. A structure that tracked the moon's phases became a calendar, predicting tides and organizing rituals. This cosmic knowledge was literally set in stone, turning monuments into permanent observatories. The architects did not need complex instruments because they used the world itself as their tool. A single, carefully placed doorway could capture a sliver of light on one specific day, illuminating an inner chamber only once a year. This was timekeeping on a monumental scale. By encoding the movements of the stars into their architecture, these cultures created a profound connection between their daily lives and the universe's grand cycles. They built a harmony between earth and sky, ensuring their structures were not just placed on the land, but woven into the very fabric of the cosmos. Behind these cosmic alignments lay another layer of hidden knowledge, a silent language of geometry and proportion. Ancient architects wielded mathematical constants with an intuition that feels almost supernatural to us today. They embedded principles like the golden ratio directly into their stonework. You can see it in the perfectly proportioned columns of the Greek Parthenon, where the relationship between the height and width of the facade creates a sense of harmony that is deeply pleasing to the human eye. The same ratio appears thousands of miles away, governing the steep slopes and precise dimensions of Mayan pyramids. This was far more than a quest for beauty. These specific proportions, these sacred ratios, conferred an incredible structural stability, allowing these monuments to stand for ages. The entire design philosophy was built upon a foundation of circles, squares, and perfect triangles. These shapes were not chosen randomly. They were considered the fundamental building blocks of creation, the sacred geometry that connected the physical world to the spiritual realm. The ratios found in a temple's floor plan were believed to be the same ones that governed the orbits of planets and the growth of living things, and this is where the connection becomes truly profound. These builders were not inventing mathematics out of thin air. They were observing it in the natural world around them. They saw the same spiral in a nautilus shell and in the unfolding of a rose petal. They recognized the recurring patterns in the human body itself, the proportions between a hand and an arm, or the features of a face. Their architectural blueprints were, in essence, an attempt to replicate the universal principles of form and function they saw everywhere in nature. This shared mathematical language, found in cultures separated by vast oceans and centuries, points to a common discovery, not a shared instruction manual. It reveals a level of computational skill that is staggering, especially when we consider that many of these societies did not leave behind complex written number systems. They were doing advanced math with ropes, stakes, and a profound understanding of spatial relationships, encoding eternity not just in stone, but in the very angles and ratios that held it all together. This mastery of geometry and proportion would have meant nothing without an equally profound understanding of the stone itself. Ancient builders possessed an almost intimate knowledge of material properties, selecting specific rocks not just for their look, but for their hidden strengths and weaknesses. They knew that granite, quarried from places like Aswan in Egypt, could travel hundreds of miles on boats and sledges to form the unyielding core of a pyramid because it could bear inconceivable weight for millennia. They chose basalt for pavements where countless feet would tread, for its incredible resistance to wear, and limestone for outer casings that could be carved with intricate hieroglyphs, yet still withstand the elements. Every stone had a purpose, a role dictated by its innate character. Unlocking this potential required a blend of brute force and delicate precision. With tools made only of stone, copper, and bronze, they developed techniques that seem impossible to us. They knew that driving wooden wedges into a natural fissure and then soaking them with water would cause the wood to expand, cleanly splitting a massive block from the bedrock. They shaped these rough blocks using harder stone hammers, patiently pounding the surface away grain by grain. For a final, mirror-like polish, they used increasingly fine abrasives like quartz sand, achieving a finish that still gleams under the sun today. But how do you move a stone colossus weighing as much as 70 elephants? The answer lies in applied physics that was elegant in its simplicity. In Egypt, they poured water onto the sand in front of a wooden sledge, drastically reducing friction and allowing a team of workers to pull a massive block with relative ease. They constructed immense ramps of earth and brick, zigzagging up the side of a rising pyramid, creating a manageable incline. In other places, they used log rollers and complex lever systems, understanding how a small, sustained force could eventually displace a colossal weight. This was not about magic spells, but about a patient, systematic application of leverage, friction, and momentum. This deep material science was the physical manifestation of their grand architectural visions. The stone was not just a building block, it was a partner in the process. By understanding its soul, these ancient engineers could transform a mountain into a monument, a riverbed into a temple. Their legacy is a challenge to our own assumptions, asking us to look closer at the silent intelligence locked within the very rocks beneath our feet. The silent intelligence of stone was matched only by the mastery of another, more fluid element. Water was not merely a resource for ancient builders, it was a fundamental force to be harnessed and revered. Across the ancient world, entire cities and temples were designed around sophisticated hydraulic systems that served both the body and the spirit. In the sprawling city of Mohenjo-Daro, in what is now Pakistan, engineers constructed an intricate network of covered drains and channels that rival modern plumbing, ensuring clean water flowed in and waste flowed out, maintaining public health for thousands of residents. This was not just practical, it was a profound statement of urban order. Meanwhile, along the Nile, Egyptian temples featured nilometers, beautiful stairwells or wells that descended into the river. These were not just architectural features, they were critical instruments. Priests and officials would use them to measure the annual flood levels, predicting the fertility of the coming season and setting taxes accordingly. The entire rhythm of their civilization, from farming to worship, was integrated directly into the temple stone. These systems reveal a deep understanding of physics that we would recognize today. They knew how to control the flow of water using gravity, building gentle, consistent slopes in their aqueducts to prevent erosion and ensure a steady supply. They constructed massive reservoirs and cisterns that could hold water for months, understanding the principles of hydrostatic pressure to make them watertight. Canals were dug to transport the very stones for their monuments, turning waterways into the heavy-duty trucks of the ancient world. But the role of water went far beyond construction logistics. In temple complexes from Southeast Asia to Central America, water features were central to spiritual life. Ceremonial baths and reflecting pools were not just for washing, they were for purification, a symbolic cleansing of the soul. The still surface of a pool could mirror the sky, creating a cosmic connection between the heavens above and the earth below, with the temple itself acting as the bridge. The gentle sound of flowing water in a courtyard created an atmosphere of tranquility, a sensory experience designed to elevate the mind. This hydraulic genius demonstrates a philosophy of profound harmony. Ancient engineers did not seek to conquer nature with brute force, but to listen to its rhythms and work in concert with them. They built their structures to withstand floods, to channel rains, and to celebrate the essential gift of water. The legacy they left is not just in the stones that remain, but in the ghostly canals and empty reservoirs that once pulsed with life, a testament to a civilization that understood how to weave the flow of water into the very fabric of their sacred spaces. The flow of water was only one of the invisible forces these master builders understood. They also possessed a deep knowledge of how sound could shape a space and alter a human mind. Ancient temples and monuments were not designed as silent, empty shells. They were engineered to be experienced with the ears as much as with the eyes. In the subterranean chambers of Malta's hypogeum, a deep, spoken word can ripple through the entire complex, creating an ethereal echo that seems to come from everywhere at once. Certain niches are tuned so perfectly that a specific frequency of chanting will resonate through the stone, vibrating the very bones of the listener and creating a powerful physical sensation. This was not an accidental discovery. The architecture itself, the curves of the walls, the angles of the ceilings, and the density of the rock were all carefully calculated to produce these acoustic phenomena. The builders were manipulating sound waves with the same precision they applied to aligning with the stars. This acoustic engineering was woven into the very fabric of ceremonial life. In the great cathedrals of later centuries, though built with different tools, the same principles applied. The long, reverberant spaces were not just for grandeur. They were designed to make a single voice or a choir sound vast and heavenly, enveloping the congregation in a blanket of sound that felt divine. Ancient Greek theaters, carved into hillsides, used the natural slope and carefully placed stone seats to project a whisper from the stage to the very back row, ensuring every member of the audience could hear the performance with perfect clarity. The layout itself was a powerful amplifier, but why go to such extraordinary lengths? Modern research is uncovering something even more profound. Scientists have measured the resonant frequencies at many of these ancient sites and found that they often fall within a specific range known to affect human brainwave patterns. These low frequencies can induce states of deep relaxation, heightened focus, or even mild trance. When a ritual chant resonated at the same frequency as the chamber itself, the sound would become amplified and all-encompassing, potentially guiding participants into an altered state of consciousness conducive to prayer, healing, or spiritual revelation. The architecture was, in effect, a tool for shaping inner experience. This intentional design of soundscapes reveals a holistic philosophy that considered the full human sensory encounter. The blueprint was not just a map of walls and doors, it was a plan for an atmosphere. It accounted for the chill of the stone, the play of light at dawn, and the way a whispered prayer would travel across a sacred space. By engineering these invisible vibrations, the ancients were building not just with stone, but with the very air we breathe and the sounds we hear, creating environments that could truly elevate the human spirit. These symbolic journeys carved in stone reveal a world where architecture was a living text. An Egyptian temple was far more than a house for a god. It was a scale model of the universe at the moment of creation. As a priest moved from the bright, open courtyard toward the dark, enclosed inner sanctuary, he was not just walking through rooms. He was reenacting the journey from the chaotic waters of primordial existence toward the first mound of solid land, where the Creator God brought order from nothingness. Each column was a stylized papyrus plant from that first marsh, each raised floor a representation of that sacred mound. The entire structure was a machine for ritual, designed to replay the myth of origins with every ceremony. Half a world away, the spires of Hindu temples reach for the sky in a different but equally profound cosmic map. Their intricate layouts are directly based on ancient texts called the Vastu Shastras, which describe the universe as a vast, symmetrical mandala. The temple's central tower, the Shikara, represents the mythical Mount Meru, the axis of the world around which all of creation revolves. The concentric walls and gateways that surround it chart the descending levels of reality, from the divine and perfect center to the material and imperfect outer world. To walk into the temple is to move toward the center of the cosmos itself. This narrative coding extends to every decorative choice. A repeating lotus motif is not merely a pretty pattern. it is a symbol of purity and spiritual rebirth, rising unsullied from murky waters. A specific count of pillars in a hall is not a random number. It often corresponds to a significant cycle in time, like the number of days in a year or phases of the moon. Even the choice of animal carvings held deep meaning. A lion might symbolize royal power and protection, while a serpent could represent the underworld and the cycles of death and regeneration. For an initiated observer, walking through these spaces was like reading a deeply layered philosophical text, where every corner, every symbol, and every number contributed to a unified understanding of the world and humanity's place within it. These structures were the ultimate teaching tools in a world before mass literacy, designed to impress core cultural values and cosmic truths directly onto the memory of every visitor. The blueprint was not just for building, it was for remembering, ensuring that the most important stories of a civilization would endure as long as the stones themselves. These structures were not just symbolic maps of the heavens, they were precision-measuring instruments carved in stone. The Colossal Observatory at Chichen Itza stands as a powerful example, a round tower with narrow, slit-like windows that seem to stare eternally at the sky. These openings were not placed at random. They are perfectly aligned with the extreme rising and setting points of the planet Venus over its complex 8-year cycle. To the Maya, Venus was not just a bright star, it was a deity intimately linked with war and rain. Tracking its movements with such exactitude was a matter of both spiritual and practical survival, dictating the timing of ceremonies and perhaps even military campaigns. The architectural achievement here is staggering, requiring generations of accumulated data to predict a planetary dance that modern astronomy confirms with computer models. This was not a simple sun marker. It was a sophisticated device for monitoring the retrograde motion of a distant world. On the other side of the globe, the massive stone tomb of Newgrange in Ireland demonstrates a different kind of celestial precision. For most of the year, its inner chamber is shrouded in deep darkness, but on the dawn of the winter solstice, something miraculous happens. As the sun crests the horizon, a single, narrow beam of light penetrates a specially constructed opening above the entrance, known as a roof box. This sliver of sunlight travels slowly down the long passageway, eventually flooding the central chamber with a golden glow that lasts for precisely 17 minutes before fading away. The alignment is so exact that even a modern engineer would struggle to achieve such millimeter-perfect accuracy with stone slabs weighing tons. This phenomenon required the builders to understand not just the sun's position on one day, but the subtle changes in its rising point over many years. To accomplish this, they must have maintained detailed records of celestial movements for centuries, a body of knowledge that has since vanished, leaving only the silent, functioning instrument as proof of its existence. The most profound implication of these architectural observatories lies in the knowledge they demand. The slow wobble in Earth's axis, known as the precession of the equinoxes, causes the position of the stars to shift minutely over a cycle of 26,000 years. For an alignment to remain true over centuries, the builders had to either account for this imperceptible drift or build with such speed that it was irrelevant. This suggests an awareness of long-term cosmic cycles that modern science only formally recognized within the last few hundred years. These monuments force us to reconsider the timeline of human discovery. What we see as temples and tombs were also the scientific laboratories of their day, places where myth and measurement merged into a single, unified pursuit of cosmic truth. The stones themselves are the only surviving records of a lost science, a permanent testimony to an intellect that watched the stars and dared to build its answers on an epic scale. The silent alignment of stones with the stars was only possible because of a hidden language of numbers. Beyond the sacred geometry of circles and triangles, ancient builders embedded complex mathematical relationships directly into their monuments, creating a permanent record of advanced computation. The Great Pyramid of Giza provides one of the most staggering examples. Its base perimeter, when divided by twice its height, yields a number incredibly close to pi, the fundamental constant defining the relationship between a circle's circumference and its diameter. This was not a coincidence. The pyramid's designers deliberately encoded this ratio into its very shape, a feat of mathematical abstraction that predates the formal discovery of pi by thousands of years. Similarly, the proportions of its inner chambers and outer facade consistently reflect the golden ratio, a number known for its unique aesthetic and structural properties. This was not just about beauty, it was about building a structure in perfect harmonic resonance with mathematical laws found throughout nature. Far across the ocean, the same intellectual ambition was at work. Mayan temples were not merely pyramids, they were physical expressions of a fantastically complex calendar system. The number of steps on a temple staircase, the count of panels on a facade, or the dimensions of a plaza often correspond precisely to key cycles in the Mayan calendar, such as the 260-day sacred round or the 5,125-year-long count. A building was a calendar you could walk on, a constant reminder of cosmic time made tangible. These numerical sequences served a deeply practical purpose in the construction process itself. Without a standardized system of measurement like meters or feet, how could a master architect in Egypt communicate precise dimensions to a quarry foreman hundreds of miles away? The answer lay in using universal, unchanging numbers. They employed a system of proportions based on the royal cubit, but the true genius was in using irrational constants like pi and phi. These numbers are relationships, not fixed lengths. This meant that a worker could build a perfectly proportional pyramid whether he was using a cubit rod or simply measuring with ropes and stakes, because the ratios would always remain the same. The recurrence of these specific mathematical ideas in cultures separated by continents and millennia is one of history's great mysteries. Did a lost civilization spread this knowledge across the globe, or did different people, by observing the same stars and the same natural patterns, independently arrive at the same mathematical truths? The evidence points to the latter, a shared human discovery of the universal constants that govern everything from the spiral of a galaxy to the structure of a seashell. The numbers etched into these ancient stones tell a quiet but undeniable story. They force us to rewrite the conventional timeline of mathematical development, revealing that the builders of the ancient world were not just skilled laborers. They were brilliant mathematicians who used the landscape as their chalkboard and stone as their permanent record. That mathematical genius encoded in stone would have been useless without an equally brilliant system for organizing the people who moved it. The true scale of achievement at places like the Giza Plateau lies not just in the architectural design, but in the monumental logistics of its construction. This was the world's first corporate enterprise, a project spanning decades that required the seamless coordination of thousands of individuals. Far from being built by slaves, evidence from worker cemeteries and nearby towns reveals a highly organized, rotating labor force of skilled Egyptians. They were divided into specialized crews with names like the Friends of Khufu or the Drunkards of Menkaura, teams responsible for quarrying, transportation, construction, and the delicate finishing work. These were not just laborers, they were artisans and engineers who took pride in their craft. Supporting this vast workforce required a temporary city to rise beside the pyramid, complete with barracks, giant bakeries producing thousands of loaves daily, breweries for beer, fish processing stations, and even medical facilities where doctors set broken bones and treated injuries. This was a fully functioning society dedicated to a single, transcendent goal. The supply chain management was a feat in itself. Quarries hundreds of miles away had to produce a constant stream of stone, with blocks being cut, transported on sledges and boats, and delivered to the building site on a precise schedule to avoid catastrophic delays. Someone had to manage the inventory of copper chisels, stone hammers, and ropes, ensuring that tools were constantly sharpened, replaced, and available where they were needed. And how did they maintain such consistent quality and alignment over 20 years and multiple generations of workers? The answer lies in a master blueprint and a rigorous system of quality control. A central core of master builders likely used standardized measuring rods and detailed plans to check every course of stone, ensuring that each new layer perfectly matched the grand design laid out decades before. This logistical symphony was perfectly attuned to the rhythms of nature. The massive construction efforts were scheduled around the annual flooding of the Nile. When the farmland was underwater and no farming could be done, a huge portion of the population was available for state service, moving to the plateau to contribute their labor. When the waters receded and the fields needed planting, this seasonal workforce returned home. This system respected the agricultural cycle while maximizing the available labor during periods of inactivity. It demonstrates a profound understanding of human resources and environmental factors. The ancient project manager had to be a master of people, materials, and time. He had to know how to motivate a crew, how to ensure a block from Aswan would fit perfectly with a block from Tura, and how to plan a project so vast that he would never live to see its completion. The organizational blueprint was the invisible framework that made the physical one possible. It was a comprehensive implementation plan that rivals the management of any modern skyscraper or bridge, proving that the greatest wonder of the ancient world was not just the pyramid itself, but the invisible society that built it. Mythology provided the narrative soul for these monumental blueprints. It was not enough for a temple to be structurally sound or astronomically aligned. It had to tell the foundational story of the people who built it. These creation myths and cosmological tales offered a complete conceptual framework, a guide for how to organize space in a way that made cosmic sense. The Vastu Shastras of India are a perfect example of this principle in action. These ancient texts did not just offer building tips, they presented a complete model of the universe, describing it as a vast cosmic man. This divine form, known as the Vastu Purusha, was then mapped directly onto the ground. The precise location for the temple's central shrine, the Garbhagriha or womb chamber, was determined to be at the exact center of this cosmic body, the navel of creation. Every wall, gateway, and courtyard was then laid out in a perfect grid around this sacred center, with each square of the grid assigned to a specific deity. The entire process of construction, from the initial consecration of the land to the final placement of the spire, was a ritual act of bringing this cosmic order into physical reality. The architect was not just a builder, he was a priest conjuring the body of a god from stone. In Egypt, a different but equally powerful story guided the hands of builders. The journey of the sun god Ra, who traveled by bark across the sky each day and through the underworld each night, was literally built into the floor plan of every major temple. As a worshipper moved from the bright, open courtyard, bustling with public life, toward the dark, silent sanctuary that held the cult statue of the god, they were reenacting the sun's passage from the world of the living into the mysterious realm of the divine. The steadily rising floor and the decreasing light levels were not architectural accidents. They were deliberate sensory cues to enhance this spiritual journey. The temple was not a static building, it was a machine for experiencing a myth. Why did these stories hold such power over design? They provided a coherent system for organizing incredibly complex architectural programs. Without a unifying narrative, how would you decide how many pillars a hall should have, or what direction the main gate should face? The mythology gave clear answers. A proportion might be derived from the number of days in a sacred cycle, or a material might be chosen because it was associated with a specific deity's power. The stories gave profound meaning to every measurement and material, transforming construction into a form of worship. The choice of stone, the flow of a corridor, the height of a ceiling, all of these elements were imbued with symbolic weight, creating a structure that was a physical embodiment of a culture's entire worldview. To walk through these spaces was to step inside a living story where every corner whispered a piece of an ancient truth. The myth was the original blueprint, the invisible pattern from which all the visible wonders grew. These ancient builders read the landscape like a master architect reads a blueprint. Their choice of location was never accidental, but a profound exercise in geological intelligence. They understood that the ground beneath their feet was not a passive foundation, but an active partner in their construction. At Machu Picchu, perched high in the Andes, the Inca engineers were acutely aware of the region's violent seismic activity. Instead of fighting the inevitable earthquakes, they designed their structures to dance with them. The stones of their walls were cut with such precision that they fit together without any mortar, creating a series of interlocking blocks. When the ground shook, these stones would bounce and settle, shifting independently before locking back into place, a technique known as ashlar masonry that has kept their city standing for centuries. They even carved the bedrock itself into terraces, which acted as massive stabilizers, preventing the entire mountainside from sliding away. Half a world away, in the desert canyons of Petra, the Nabateans displayed a different kind of genius. They did not build their city from the ground up, but carved it directly from the rose-red sandstone cliffs. This was not just for dramatic effect. The solid rock provided unparalleled natural defense, while the deep, narrow canyon, known as the Syc, functioned as a natural wind tunnel, funneling cool breezes through the city and regulating the scorching desert temperatures. They even carved intricate channels into the canyon walls to control flash floods, turning a destructive force of nature into a reliable water supply. This deep geological knowledge extended to what lay beneath the surface. Ancient builders often selected sites based on the presence of stable bedrock, avoiding areas riddled with underground faults or soft, compressible soil. They sought out specific mineral deposits, not just for precious metals, but for the right types of building stone: limestone for carving, granite for endurance, and sandstone for workability. They observed erosion patterns over generations, choosing ridges and plateaus that were naturally resistant to wind and water. The landscape itself directly informed the design. A natural rock outcrop might become the altar of a temple. A sacred spring fed by a reliable aquifer would determine the exact center of a settlement. A strategically placed hill became the foundation for a fortress, its contours dictating the layout of the walls. This was not a fight against nature, but a collaboration. They were not conquerors of the landscape, but its most attentive students, learning its secrets and leveraging its inherent strengths. The longevity of their creations is a direct result of this partnership, a testament to the power of building with the earth rather than simply upon it. The physics of moving mountains becomes tangible when you watch a modern reconstruction team struggling with a single multi-ton block. They are not using magic, just meticulously recreated ancient techniques, and the results are humbling. One of the most elegantly simple solutions was the lubricated sledge. In Egypt, experiments have shown that pouring water onto the desert sand in front of a wooden sled dramatically reduces friction. The water creates a paste that prevents sand from piling up, effectively turning a near-impossible drag into a manageable pull. A team of around 20 people can then move a stone weighing several tons with a steady, coordinated effort. This was not brute force, it was the clever application of a basic physical principle, reducing resistance where the load meets the ground. For even larger obstacles, ancient engineers developed counterweight systems. Imagine a massive stone block positioned at the top of a steep ramp. To lower it safely without losing control, workers would construct a wooden cage filled with heavy stones on the opposite side of a central pivot. This counterweight would act as a brake, allowing them to lower the colossal load in a slow, measured descent, using gravity as a controlled tool rather than a destructive force. The same principle in reverse could help lift stones, using the weight of one block to help raise another. The coordination required for these operations was a marvel in itself. Moving a 70-ton statue is not a chaotic heave-ho. It is a symphony of synchronized labor. Teams would pull on ropes in a precise rhythm, perhaps guided by a foreman beating a drum or chanting a cadence. This rhythmic pulling created a consistent, fluid motion that overcame the stone's immense inertia far more effectively than sporadic, disorganized tugging. It turned a collection of individuals into a single, powerful machine. Different environments bred specialized solutions. While Egyptians mastered desert transport, the Polynesian cultures, surrounded by ocean, became experts in moving megaliths over water. They would lash massive stone blocks to the sides of outrigger canoes or build large rafts, using the buoyancy of the water to negate the crushing weight. This allowed them to transport their sacred stones across vast distances between islands, a logistical feat that seems almost mythical. Underlying every successful move was a deep, intuitive understanding of the terrain itself. The engineers had to calculate the maximum safe slope for a ramp, knowing that too steep an incline would make pulling impossible, while too shallow a slope would require an impossibly long structure. They assessed soil mechanics, choosing firm, stable paths and avoiding soft ground that could buckle under the pressure. They understood how to distribute the force evenly across the moving platform to prevent the wood from cracking or the stone from shifting. These were not just construction workers, they were applied physicists who could read the land and manipulate fundamental forces with nothing but ropes, wood, and water. Their legacy is a powerful reminder that formal education is not the only path to profound knowledge. It was the relentless school of observation, experimentation, and the accumulated wisdom of generations that wrote these hidden blueprints for moving the unmovable. Achieving such precise alignments required a deep understanding of the sky's clockwork. The ancient Egyptians did not have magnetic compasses to find true north, so they turned to the one thing that never failed, the unwavering circle of stars around the celestial pole. They used a simple yet brilliant tool called a merkit, a forked sighting stick made of palm rib. An observer would mark the rising and setting positions of a single circumpolar star, like Kochab or Mizar, using the merkit to create an arc on the ground. The exact midpoint of that arc pointed directly to true north, a method so accurate it could achieve an alignment within 1/15th of a single degree. This foundational line, etched into the desert floor, became the sacred axis upon which an entire pyramid would be built, a process that demanded not just a single night of observation, but many nights of verification to account for atmospheric distortion and human error. This celestial surveying was a global phenomenon. In the British Isles, the builders of stone circles employed a different but equally effective technique. They would set up a central stake and track the sweeping shadow it cast throughout the day. The shortest shadow cast at local noon provided a perfect north-south line. To find the solstice points, they would observe the sun's extreme rising and setting positions on the horizon over many years, marking these annual turning points with permanent stones. The genius of these methods lies in their simplicity and their reliance on immutable natural laws. How did they ensure this initial, fragile line on the ground was transferred perfectly across a massive construction site spanning hundreds of meters? The answer is the humble water level. By filling a long trench with water, builders could create a perfectly level plain, allowing them to extend their baseline across any terrain, regardless of hills or dips. They used plumb bobs for vertical alignment and long, taut ropes for straight lines, tools that leveraged fundamental physics with elegant efficiency. The consistency of these alignments across decades of construction points to a rigorous system of quality control. Master surveyors would have continuously checked the work, using the stars themselves to verify that the growing structure remained true to its original cosmic blueprint. This was not a one-time act, but a sustained ritual of measurement and correction. The perfect orientation of these monuments was a testament to patience, a civilization's willingness to watch the stars for generations to ensure their earthly creation mirrored the heavens above. This vast and intricate knowledge was far too precious to be left to chance. Without written textbooks or digital files, ancient societies developed incredibly sophisticated systems for preserving their architectural blueprints across generations. The primary vessel for this information was not paper but people. A master builder would train his apprentices through years of hands-on experience, passing down complex formulas and techniques through verbal instruction and direct demonstration. This was not a casual transfer of information. It was a rigorous, disciplined process where precise measurements, ritual incantations, and the exact sequence of construction were memorized using powerful mnemonic devices. Rhythmic chants, poetic verses, and even songs transformed dry numerical data into memorable stories, ensuring that a builder could carry the entire plan for a temple in his mind, ready to be recalled at a moment's notice. This oral tradition created a living library of expertise, one that could adapt and refine its knowledge with each new project. Alongside the spoken word, physical objects served as permanent, tangible guides. While we might envision rolled-up paper plans, their blueprints were often three-dimensional. Craftsmen created small-scale models out of clay or wood, which illustrated the proportions and relationships of a structure far more clearly than a two-dimensional drawing could. On the construction site itself, full-scale diagrams were laid out directly on prepared surfaces. In Egypt, workers used snap lines coated in red ochre to mark precise guidelines on stone floors, creating a giant, temporary blueprint for the foundation courses. In other cultures, complex geometric patterns were created using knotted cords and stakes, a physical representation of sacred geometry that could be used to check angles and alignments as the walls rose. These were not mere sketches, they were functional construction tools that embedded the master plan directly into the workspace. To protect this specialized knowledge from being lost or diluted, it was often entrusted to specific families or closed guilds. A stone carving dynasty in India might hold the secret recipes for a particular mortar, passed only from father to son. A guild of bronze workers in Mesopotamia would guard the techniques for casting massive doors. This created a distributed system of expertise where no single person held all the secrets, but each master was the undisputed authority in their domain. This system ensured continuity even through wars, famines, and dynastic changes. The guilds became the custodians of their craft, maintaining standards and innovating within a protected tradition. The remarkable consistency in architectural style seen over hundreds of years, from one pharaoh's pyramid to the next, is a direct testament to the power of this guild-based system. The method of preserving the knowledge was a masterpiece of social engineering, every bit as clever as the engineering principles it was designed to protect. Every blueprint had to breathe with the landscape it touched, while the foundational principles of sacred geometry and cosmic alignment were universal. Their execution was always a conversation with the local environment. Greek architects, for instance, did not simply copy temple designs blindly. When building with the soft, fine-grained limestone of the Greek mainland, they could create slender, elegant columns with intricate fluting. But when they colonized areas like southern Italy and Sicily, they encountered a much harder, coarser limestone. This stone was difficult to carve with the same precision. Instead of forcing the impossible, the architects adapted. They designed columns that were thicker, with simpler capitals and less delicate detail, creating a more robust aesthetic that respected the nature of their new material. The underlying mathematical proportions remained sacred, but the execution was pragmatically tailored. This same intelligent flexibility shines in the Andes. The Inca are famous for their polygonal masonry, where massive, irregularly shaped stones fit together like a three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle. This was not just an artistic choice, it was a direct response to the granite they quarried. This particular stone fractured naturally into these complex, multifaceted blocks. The Inca engineers observed this property and developed a fitting technique that exploited it. They would painstakingly shape the stones, rubbing one against another with sand and water until the faces matched perfectly, creating those famous seamless joins without any mortar. They worked with the stone's inherent character rather than against it. This deep material wisdom allowed for remarkable innovation within tradition. A blueprint might call for a specific type of wood for roof beams, but if that tree did not grow in a newly settled territory, builders would not abandon the project. They possessed such a thorough understanding of material properties that they could identify a local substitute with similar tensile strength, weight, and durability. The symbolic meaning of the structure could be preserved even as the physical components changed. A temple meant to represent a mountain, for instance, could be built from the local red sandstone instead of gray granite, yet through its form and placement, it would still evoke the same powerful connection to the earth. This balance between fixed principles and fluid application reveals the true sophistication of ancient engineering. The blueprint was a guide, a set of harmonic rules, but not a rigid command. It left room for the master builder's intuition, for on-the-ground problem solving, and for respectful collaboration with the immediate world. The greatest testament to their genius is not that they built the same way everywhere, but that they knew exactly how and when to build differently. The stones themselves might have been conduits for something far less tangible than weight and far more mysterious than light. Beyond the physical alignments and mathematical ratios, some researchers propose that ancient architects were mapping an invisible geography of energy. They suggest that sites like Stonehenge and the Great Pyramid were not just placed for celestial observation, but were deliberately positioned at points of heightened geomagnetic activity. Modern instruments have detected unusual electromagnetic fluctuations at these locations, spikes and troughs that seem to pulse with a rhythm all their own. Many of these sacred places also coincide with deep geological fault lines. When immense tectonic pressures squeeze quartz-rich rock, it generates a small electrical charge, a phenomenon known as the piezoelectric effect. Could the builders have sensed this subtle energy, this breath of the living earth, and chosen to build directly upon its source? This idea ventures into the controversial realm of ley lines, the hypothetical alignments that are said to connect ancient monuments across vast distances. While mainstream archaeology dismisses this as pseudoscience, the persistent coincidence of sacred sites along these alignments is a puzzle that continues to intrigue. If there was an intentional pattern, what was its purpose? One compelling theory is that these structures were designed to concentrate and amplify these natural energies. The concentric circles of a stone ring might have acted as a lens, focusing ambient forces toward a central point. The precise geometry of a pyramid's chambers could have created a resonant cavity, transforming the entire structure into a kind of capacitor for subtle power. What would this concentrated energy be used for? Proponents of these theories point to traditions of healing and altered states of consciousness. Perhaps the chambers within these monuments were not just tombs or treasuries, but spaces designed for spiritual and physical rejuvenation, where the Earth's own energy could facilitate deep meditation or even accelerate the body's natural healing processes. The very stones vibrating at specific frequencies might have interacted with human brainwave patterns, guiding participants into profound states of awareness. This is without question the most speculative layer of the ancient blueprint. It challenges the very foundations of our materialistic worldview, asking us to consider whether these master builders perceived dimensions of reality that our modern instruments are only just beginning to measure. They may have seen the world not as a collection of separate, inert objects, but as a unified, energetic field. In this view, a temple was not merely a building on the land, but a vital node in a planetary network of power, a place where the Earth's pulse and human consciousness could meet and merge. Whether fact or fascinating fiction, these energy theories force a humbling question. Have we, in our focus on the visible and the measurable, overlooked the very force that gave these places their true power? A single lifetime was never enough to contain these monumental visions. The stones we marvel at today often passed from a grandparent's hands to a grandchild's, a continuous thread of labor woven across the centuries. Consider the great European cathedrals, their spires reaching for the heavens over building timelines that could stretch for 500 years. The master mason who laid the foundation stones knew he would never stand in the completed nave, never hear the choir's music echo from the vaulted ceiling he designed. His work was an act of faith, a promise made to a future he would never see. This demanded a blueprint of a different kind, one that was both incredibly precise in its core principles and remarkably flexible in its details. The original architectural plans, often drawn on vast sheets of parchment or etched into slate floors, established the sacred geometry, the key alignments, and the structural load-bearing points. Yet as the decades rolled on, new materials became available, architectural styles evolved, and even the very purpose of a chapel might shift. The genius of the system was its ability to absorb these changes without collapsing the original vision. A later generation might introduce a new style of stained glass or a more elaborate facade, but they would always work within the foundational framework set down generations before, ensuring the final building felt like a unified whole, not a chaotic patchwork. This required an unbroken chain of knowledge, a living tradition where the master builder trained his most gifted apprentice not just in the art of cutting stone, but in the philosophy behind the entire design. The apprentice had to understand the why behind the original plan, the symbolic meaning of a specific number of pillars or the structural necessity of a flying buttress, so that he could make intelligent adaptations decades later. This long-term perspective reveals a psychology almost foreign to our world of quarterly reports and immediate results. It was a culture that valued legacy over instant gratification, that measured achievement not in a single lifespan, but in the enduring impact on the community and the favor of their God. What kind of societal stability does it take to fund a project for 200 years? How do you maintain political and economic focus when the payoff is generations away? The answer lies in a shared cultural narrative so powerful that it became more real than the daily struggles of any one individual. The cathedral was not just a building, it was the physical embodiment of a community's eternal soul, a project that bound every generation together in a common, sacred purpose. The true blueprint was not just on parchment, it was etched into the very identity of the people, a testament to a patience that could build for eternity. This seamless fusion of form and function reveals a design philosophy where beauty was never an afterthought. The fluting carved into Greek columns is a perfect example. Those elegant vertical grooves did more than just catch the light, they actually made the columns stronger. By removing a small amount of stone, they reduced the overall weight of the column without significantly compromising its load-bearing capacity, and the ridges that remained acted like the corrugations in cardboard, adding stiffness and resistance to buckling. The aesthetic choice was in reality a brilliant structural calculation. In Egypt, the massive, inward-sloping walls of their temples, a feature called bata, were not merely a stylistic preference. This inclination gave the walls a much broader base, dramatically increasing their stability against the immense forces of gravity and time. But the architects took this practical solution and turned it into a profound sensory experience. As you walked through the progressively narrower and darker spaces toward the inner sanctuary, the slanted walls funneled your view upward, creating a forced perspective that made the structure feel even more colossal and overwhelming. The entire design guided both your body and your perception on a deliberate journey from the bright, public world to the mysterious, divine core. Even the most ornate details often hid a practical purpose. The gargoyles jutting from medieval cathedrals are famous for their grotesque and imaginative forms, but their primary job was far from decorative. They were the endpoints of the complex gutter system, designed to throw rainwater as far away from the building's foundation as possible, protecting the delicate stonework from erosion. The intricate carvings around doorways and windows often served to reinforce the most vulnerable joints in the masonry, while patterned floor mosaics in busy Roman baths used hard, contrasting stones in high-traffic areas to camouflage the inevitable wear and tear. Every artistic decision was rooted in a deep understanding of material behavior and environmental challenge. This holistic approach stands in stark contrast to our modern tendency to separate the engineer from the artist. We often design a building for pure function first, and then ask a designer to apply a beautiful facade, like putting a decorative skin on a utilitarian frame. Ancient builders would have found this separation nonsensical. For them, the structural integrity, the flow of water, the play of light and shadow, and the emotional impact on a visitor were all part of a single, unified problem to be solved. The building was conceived as a complete experience for all the senses, a machine for living, working, or worshipping that was meant to be both perfectly functional and spiritually uplifting. The very way we categorize knowledge today, with rigid boundaries between technical and artistic disciplines, would have been foreign to their way of thinking. The master architect was expected to be a mathematician, an astronomer, a sculptor, and a poet all at once. This challenges our most basic assumptions about creativity and practicality, suggesting that the most enduring human achievements emerge not when art and engineering are separated, but when they are recognized as two expressions of the very same intelligent blueprint. The very stones seemed to breathe with an awareness of the human mind. Ancient builders were not just constructing walls and roofs, they were carefully engineering human emotion itself. They understood that the way we move through a space, the light that falls upon us, and the sounds we hear are not neutral experiences, but powerful tools that shape our inner world. Walking into an Egyptian temple was a masterclass in this psychological design. You began in a vast, sun-drenched courtyard, a space open to the public and the sky. But as you moved deeper, the path narrowed, the ceiling lowered, and the light began to fade. This was not a random architectural choice. The gradual compression of the space created a physical sensation of leaving the mundane world behind, a feeling of anticipation and even slight anxiety. Your own body, squeezed by the narrowing walls, became part of the ritual. Then you would finally step into the inner sanctuary, a dark, expansive chamber holding the statue of the god. The sudden shift from a tight corridor to a vast, holy darkness was a psychological release, a moment of awe designed to make the divine presence feel overwhelming and real. This entire journey was a carefully crafted emotional arc, built in stone. Light was another precise instrument in this psychological toolkit. At sites like Newgrange or Abu Simbel, the alignment was not just for marking a date on a calendar. It was for creating a moment of pure theater. On one specific morning of the year, a beam of sunlight would pierce the inner darkness, illuminating a statue or a sacred symbol for a few breathtaking minutes. For the people witnessing this event, it was not a simple trick of the light. It was a direct communication from the cosmos, a visible sign that the gods approved of the king, the priesthood, and the entire social order. This dramatic visual effect reinforced cosmological beliefs, but it also solidified hierarchical power, making abstract authority feel as real and undeniable as the sun itself. The architects were manipulating perception to guide belief. They used scale to evoke humility, darkness to create mystery, and sudden light to inspire revelation. Even the acoustic properties we explored earlier were part of this design. The resonant frequencies in a chamber could calm a frantic mind or elevate a chant into a transcendent experience, directly influencing the neurological state of the participants. This was architecture as a form of applied psychology, long before the field had a name. The blueprint accounted for the invisible landscape of the human heart, proving that the most sophisticated design of all is the one that builds not just for the body, but for the soul within it. This philosophy of psychological design was matched by a profound physical symbiosis with the earth. Ancient builders did not simply place structures on the land, they allowed the land to dictate the form of the structure itself. A Greek temple was not just built on a hilltop, it became the crown of that hill. By positioning these magnificent structures on elevated sites like the Acropolis, the architects framed them against the vast expanse of sky and open sea. The temple did not block the view, it completed it, creating a powerful focal point that seemed to grow organically from the bedrock. The visual impact was calculated for miles around, a gleaming white marble landmark that declared a harmonious balance between human achievement and the natural world. Deep within the Central American jungles, the same principle guided Mayan architects. Their massive pyramids were not cleared from the dense foliage, they emerged from it. The builders carefully integrated the jungle canopy into their designs, allowing the towering trees to frame the stone structures in a way that made them appear both mysterious and eternal. The approach to a temple was often through shaded, natural pathways, building anticipation before revealing the monumental architecture in a sudden, breathtaking clearing. This was more than just aesthetics, it was a deep ecological strategy. These builders were master observers of environmental cycles. They positioned openings and courtyards to capture cooling seasonal breezes, creating natural ventilation systems that made interiors comfortable without any mechanical aid. They studied the sun's path across the sky throughout the year, designing overhangs and colonnades that provided shade during the hottest months, while allowing the low winter sun to penetrate and warm the inner spaces. They even factored in the growth patterns of local vegetation, ensuring that sacred groves or specific trees would mature to enhance the site's spiritual atmosphere decades after construction was complete. This created a seamless blend of the built and the grown, where it became difficult to tell where the forest ended and the temple began. This entire approach reflects an ecological mindset millennia before the term was coined. These structures were not imposed upon their settings, they were conversations with them. They demonstrate a sophisticated understanding that humanity is not separate from nature, but a participant within a larger, living ecosystem. The enduring legacy of this integration offers a powerful lesson for our own time. In an age of concrete and steel, where construction often means clearing and flattening, these ancient blueprints remind us that the most sustainable and beautiful buildings are those that listen to the whispers of the land, enhancing its inherent beauty rather than silencing it. Every architectural choice served a deeper ceremonial purpose. The stones of Stonehenge are not a random circle, but a carefully arranged stage for ritual processions. Its outer bank and inner ditch create a natural boundary, separating the sacred interior from the profane world outside. On the morning of the summer solstice, participants would likely have walked along a specific avenue, their movement choreographed by the architecture to build anticipation as the sun rose directly over the heel stone, framing their entrance into the heart of the monument. This was not a passive observation, it was an embodied experience where the very path you walked was part of the ceremony, aligning your physical journey with a celestial event. The same principle of guided movement is magnified in the sprawling complexes of Egypt. A typical temple was not a single building you entered, but a sequence of spaces you progressed through. You began in the open courtyard, a space accessible to the wider public, bustling with activity. Then you passed through the hypostyle hall, a forest of massive columns where light was dimmer and the ceiling lower, creating a sense of compression and mystery. Finally, only the high priest could enter the dark, silent sanctuary that housed the statue of the god. This architectural journey was a physical manifestation of spiritual progression from the outer world to the inner divine. The design meticulously controlled what you saw, and when you saw it, specific doorways were aligned to frame a statue at the far end of a hall, making it visible only from a certain angle, a revelation reserved for those who had advanced in the ritual. Acoustic properties were also engineered for ceremonial impact. In some temples, a whisper at the entrance could be heard clearly at the altar, allowing a priest's invocation to travel supernaturally through the space, while in others, the design might swallow sound, creating pockets of profound silence around the most sacred areas. Even the texture underfoot was part of the blueprint. The floors might transition from rough stone in public areas to polished, reflective surfaces in the inner chambers, a subtle sensory cue that you were stepping into a more refined, holy realm. Every pillar, every corridor slope, and every light shaft was a deliberate component of the ritual machinery. The structure was not a backdrop for the ceremony. It was an active participant, directing the flow of people, focusing their attention, and amplifying the emotional power of every chant, prayer, and offering. This reveals that what we might label as mere aesthetics, like a narrowing corridor or a strategically placed window, were in fact critical functional elements of a living, breathing ceremonial practice. That same invisible language of numbers governed the very proportions of these sacred spaces. Beyond the circles and squares of basic geometry, ancient architects worked with a complex grammar of mathematical relationships, a system of ratios that gave their structures both visual harmony and incredible endurance. Long before the Greek mathematician Pythagoras was born, His famous theorem for right-angled triangles was being used to lay out Babylonian temples with perfect square corners. The builders knew that a triangle with sides measuring 3, 4, and 5 units would always create a perfect right angle, a practical application of abstract math that ensured their walls rose straight and true. Half a world away, the architects of Indian temples followed texts that dictated every dimension using precise fractional relationships derived from Vedic mathematics. The height of a doorway might be precisely 7/8 of the width of the hall, and the spire's height a complex fraction of the base's diagonal. This was not about random beauty, it was about following a coded recipe for perfection. These proportional systems resonated so deeply because they mirrored the very patterns of the world the builders observed. They noticed that the same mathematical ratios that made a musical chord sound pleasing to the ear also created a building that felt inherently right to the human eye and spirit. A room whose length was precisely 1.5 times its width created a sense of balance and order that was almost subconsciously felt by anyone who entered. This is why structures built on these principles feel so timeless and serene. They are literally in tune with the natural laws of harmony. The most compelling mystery is how these same mathematical ideas emerged in cultures separated by oceans and centuries. The Egyptians, the Greeks, the Maya, and the builders of the great Indian temples all arrived at a reverence for the golden ratio, a specific proportional relationship found in the spiral of a nautilus shell and the arrangement of seeds in a sunflower. Did a lost master civilization spread this knowledge across the globe, or did different peoples, by simply observing the same stars, the same plants, and the same human body, independently unlock the same universal truths? The evidence carved in stone suggests the latter, that humanity has a shared instinct for the mathematical patterns that underpin reality. This ancient mathematical language is far from a forgotten relic. Modern architects and designers still study these proportions, using them to create everything from skyscrapers to smartphones, because they tap into a deep, human sense of beauty and stability. The hidden blueprint was written in the universal language of mathematics, a code that connected the cosmos to the craftsman, ensuring that their work would not only stand but sing for thousands of years. These structures were more than monuments, they were permanent clocks built from stone. Across the ancient world, entire buildings were designed to track the passage of time with an accuracy that could guide a civilization. The Intihuatana stone at Machu Picchu, a beautifully carved granite pillar, functioned as a sophisticated solar clock. Its precise angles and surfaces cast distinct shadows throughout the day and across the seasons, allowing Inca priests to determine the solstices and equinoxes with certainty, anchoring their ceremonial year to the sun's unwavering journey. Similarly, the Mayan Caracol Observatory was not merely watching Venus. It was logging its movements against a complex calendar that interwove a 260-day sacred cycle with a 365-day solar year. This architectural timekeeping was the heartbeat of society. It told farmers exactly when to plant and when to harvest, aligning their labor with the rains and the sun. It gave priests the power to announce the correct dates for rituals, ensuring that offerings to the gods were made at the most potent celestial moments. For a culture without portable clocks or printed calendars, these stone structures were the central, unchangeable reference point for every practical and spiritual activity. The true genius of this system was its permanence and resilience. A papyrus scroll could burn, an oral tradition could fade, but a mountaintop shrine or a towering observatory would endure for centuries. By carving their calendars directly into the landscape, these cultures guaranteed that the most vital knowledge of time and season would never be lost. It was a backup system for civilization itself, etched in granite and aligned with the stars. This reveals a profound integration of purpose. A temple was not just a place of worship, it was an almanac. A pyramid was not just a tomb, it was a seasonal marker. The spiritual, the scientific, and the practical were not separate categories to the ancient mind, but intertwined threads in a single, magnificent blueprint for living in harmony with the cosmos. The stones themselves were a map of the human world. Every ancient structure encoded a cultural blueprint, a three-dimensional diagram of a society's deepest values and hierarchies. You can read its social structure not in texts but in the very pathways and walls. The Forbidden City in Beijing is a masterclass in this principle. Its entire layout is a perfect representation of the Chinese cosmic and bureaucratic order. The complex is aligned on a precise north-south axis, with the most important halls, those of the emperor, positioned at the center, mirroring the pole star around which the entire universe was believed to revolve. The further you move from this central axis, the less important the buildings become, housing ministers, then servants, then guards. This spatial organization made the emperor's supreme, central authority an undeniable physical fact, a lesson in power taught by walking through its gates. Access was a privilege granted in strict stages, visually reinforcing a social pyramid where every individual knew their fixed place. Across the world, Egyptian temple complexes operated on a similar, though spiritually focused, logic. The journey from the noisy public courtyard toward the silent, dark inner sanctuary was a physical progression through layers of sacredness and social status. The common public could only enter the outer courts. Priests and nobles could proceed into the columned halls, but only the pharaoh and the high priest were permitted to enter the innermost shrine to stand before the god. This graduated restriction was not merely about security, it was a built-in reinforcement of a divinely ordained social order. The architecture itself taught that approaching the divine was a hierarchical process reserved for an elite few. The message was carved into the very floor plan. This cultural encoding extended to the smallest decorative details. The size and ornamentation of a building element was a direct statement of importance. In a medieval European castle, the Great Hall was vast and often the most decorated room, because it was the heart of communal life and the seat of the Lord's power. In contrast, private bedchambers were small and Spartan. The grandeur of a pyramid's casing stones or the intricate carvings on a temple's facade were not just displays of wealth, they were proclamations of a ruler's divine right and ability to command vast resources. Even the choice of which way a building faced could communicate a worldview, perhaps toward a sacred mountain or away from the land of the dead. These structures were permanent, unyielding teachers of cultural norms. A citizen did not need to read a philosophical treatise on social order. They experienced it every time they visited the temple or gazed upon the palace walls. The architecture guided behavior, dictated movement, and constantly reminded everyone of their role within the collective. It made abstract principles of power, purity, and hierarchy as solid and real as the stone beneath their feet. This is why understanding the cultural dimension is so vital. It reveals that what we might see as a simple wall was often a social boundary, and what appears as a beautiful column was actually a pillar supporting an entire worldview. The final design was only one part of the master plan. For a project spanning generations, the ancient architects had to map out the entire construction sequence, a step-by-step process that was as brilliant as the finished monument itself. In Egypt, the Great Pyramids did not rise in a single, chaotic effort. They were built in carefully calculated layers, with evidence pointing to the use of internal spiral ramps. As each new course of stone was laid, This ramp would snake its way up the inside of the structure, providing a stable, enclosed roadway for workers to haul the massive blocks into place. Once the summit was reached and the capstone set, the ramp itself was then systematically dismantled from the top down, its stones often repurposed for the outer casing or nearby temples. This phased approach solved the immense logistical problem of how to lift millions of tons of stone hundreds of feet into the air, all while maintaining the perfect geometry of the pyramid from its very first day. Across Europe centuries later, the master masons of Gothic cathedrals faced a different but equally daunting challenge. They were building upward with soaring vaults and vast stained glass windows, structures that were inherently unstable until the very last stone was locked into place. Their solution was a construction sequence of breathtaking precision. They would first erect the massive pillars and the outer walls. Then they would carefully construct the delicate stone web of the rib vaults overhead. Only after this skeleton was complete and self-supporting would they dare to fill in the spaces between the ribs with thinner stone, finally creating the iconic ceilings that defied gravity. Every single phase had to be planned to perfection because a mistake in the sequence, like building a wall before its supporting arch was in place, could lead to a catastrophic collapse that would set the project back decades. This required an intimate understanding of structural loads at every single stage. The builders had to know exactly how much weight a partially completed arch could bear before the centering was removed, or how the stress would shift across a wall when a new wing was added. They managed intricate material delivery schedules, ensuring that specific types of stone, timber for scaffolding, and lead for roofing arrived precisely when they were needed, not a moment too soon or too late. And they organized a rotating workforce of thousands, from quarrymen to sculptors, whose specialized tasks had to be perfectly synchronized across a timeline longer than any single human life. The true blueprint was therefore a dynamic, living document. It was not just a picture of the final product, but a detailed instruction manual for the entire journey of creation, accounting for the physics of an unfinished structure and the rhythm of the seasons. This phased intelligence reveals that ancient project management was a science in its own right, a hidden dimension of their genius that ensured their most audacious dreams would not just be designed, but successfully built to stand the test of time. The direction a temple faced was never an arbitrary decision. It was a declaration of faith, a physical alignment with the cosmos that rooted a building in a specific worldview. In ancient Egypt, the vast majority of temples were oriented precisely toward the east, the domain of the rising sun. This was a direct architectural embrace of the god Ra and the eternal promise of rebirth his daily appearance represented. The entire structure was designed to capture that first sliver of dawn light, channeling its life-giving energy into the sacred spaces within, making the myth of creation a tangible event that happened every single morning. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, a different cosmic order dictated the layout of Chinese imperial palaces. Here, the primary orientation was unwaveringly toward the south. This alignment placed the emperor, the son of heaven, in his proper celestial position. He sat on his throne facing the benevolent southern winds and the nourishing sun, his back protected against the harsh, cold winds from the north, which were associated with barbarians and chaos. The entire Forbidden City is a masterpiece of this southern orientation, its main halls and gates arrayed along a north-south axis that made the emperor the literal pivot of the universe. This was not just about comfort or defense, it was about manifesting a cosmic hierarchy in stone and timber. The astonishing precision of these alignments, often accurate to within a fraction of a single degree, tells us this was a matter of supreme importance. How could they achieve such accuracy over distances of hundreds of meters? They used the same simple, brilliant tools that aligned the pyramids, citing poles, water levels, and the unchanging stars, applying this celestial surveying to encode a spiritual truth. The choice of direction was a language in itself. A structure facing west might be a tomb, guiding the soul toward the setting sun and the realm of the dead. One facing a specific mountain peak honored a local deity believed to reside there. The direction was never just a point on a compass, it was a profound symbolic statement. It connected the earthly realm to the divine, the temporary to the eternal, and the human to the cosmic. To walk through the main gate of an Egyptian temple was to walk toward the sun itself. To enter a Chinese palace from the south was to acknowledge the emperor's heavenly mandate. The blueprint was not complete until its orientation locked the building into its proper place, not just on the land, but within the entire ordered universe. These recurring forms were the very words of an ancient architectural language. A lotus blossom carved at the top of an Egyptian column was far more than a beautiful detail. It was a direct reference to the myth of creation, a symbol of the first land emerging from the primordial waters. Every time a person saw that lotus capital, they were reminded of the world's birth and the promise of eternal renewal. In the same way, the feathered serpent winding its way up a Mayan pyramid was not just a fearsome decoration. It was Quetzalcoatl or Kukulkan, a deity representing the union of earth and sky, a symbol of both divine knowledge and the king's rightful power to rule. To the people, the temple itself became the body of the serpent, a manifestation of celestial authority on earth. This symbolic vocabulary was consistent and widely understood. Just as we recognize a red octagon as a command to stop, an initiated observer in the ancient world would instantly grasp the meaning behind a specific type of column, a repeating zigzag pattern, or the depiction of a certain animal. A lion carved at a gateway was a universal sign of protection and royal strength, guarding the sacred space from malevolent forces. A pattern of spirals might represent the endless cycle of life, death, and rebirth, a concept shared by cultures from prehistoric Europe to the Pacific Islands. This shared language allowed for incredibly efficient communication of complex ideas in a largely non-literate society. The architecture did the teaching. A villager who could not read a single glyph would still understand the story of their people, their place in the cosmos, and the power of their ruler, simply by walking through a temple complex and observing its symbolic elements. The consistency of this visual language across centuries is what makes it so powerful and recognizable to us today. When we see the same lotus motif in a temple from the Old Kingdom and another from the Ptolemaic period, separated by 2,000 years, we are witnessing the endurance of a core cultural value. The blueprint was not just about physical dimensions, it was about preserving a system of meaning. It ensured that every new building, no matter when it was constructed, would reinforce the same fundamental truths about the world, the gods, and the social order. To understand this symbolic vocabulary is to finally hear what these stones have been whispering all along. They are not silent ruins, but pages from a vast, open-air library, written in a language of form and symbol that transcends the need for written words. Water flowed through these ancient cities with a purpose far beyond simple survival. In the sun-drenched courtyards of Moorish palaces, elaborate water channels and reflecting pools were not just decorative. They were a form of climate control, where the steady evaporation from these surfaces cooled the surrounding air, creating refreshing microclimates in the heart of the desert. This was engineering in service of human comfort, a marriage of beauty and environmental science. On a vastly different scale, the Roman aqueducts stand as monuments to a relentless pursuit of precision. These towering structures were not just bridges for water, they were gravity-powered machines. Their builders calculated gradients so exact that the water would flow for dozens of miles without stagnating or gaining destructive speed, a feat of surveying that required an incredible grasp of mathematics and the lay of the land. The water's journey was a meticulously managed process from source to endpoint. It began in protected springs, then traveled through settling tanks where impurities would naturally sink. It was then channeled through extensive networks of lead or ceramic pipes, with distribution casella or water towers, using pressure and valves to direct the flow to public fountains, luxurious bathhouses, and even private villas. This was a complete system handling storage in massive reservoirs, distribution through pressurized pipes, and drainage through underground sewers, all working in unison. The engineering principles at play were profound. They understood hydrostatic pressure, ensuring their systems were watertight. They mastered the physics of open channel flow, designing their aqueducts to minimize turbulence and energy loss. They even practiced a form of water purification, using settling basins and filtration through layers of sand and gravel. This was not just plumbing, it was applied materials science and fluid dynamics on a civic scale. The true genius of these hydraulic systems lies in their seamless integration. Water was never an afterthought, a utility to be hidden away. It was an essential architectural element, as important as any wall or column. A temple's sacred pool was both a place for ritual cleansing and a thermal mass that helped regulate the building's temperature. A palace's fountain was both a display of wealth and a natural humidifier. The gurgle of a channel was part of the soundscape, a constant reminder of the civilization's mastery over the elements. This holistic approach reveals a planning philosophy where infrastructure and architecture were conceived as a single, unified entity, a hidden circulatory system that gave life, comfort, and meaning to the stone body of the city. These stone calendars used light as their ink and shadow as their pen. Deep within Choco Canyon, a single sliver of sunlight, known as the sun dagger, pierces a rock shelf. On the summer solstice, this blade of light perfectly bisects a carved spiral petroglyph. As the seasons turn, the dagger shifts, touching smaller surrounding spirals to mark the spring and autumn equinoxes. This was not a random act of nature. It was a deliberate, large-scale instrument, a solar calendar etched into a cliff face that used the moving sun to inscribe the year's pivotal moments onto stone. The architects who designed this feature possessed a deep, long-term understanding of the sun's shifting path along the horizon, a knowledge accumulated over generations of patient observation. They engineered the entire site to function as a precise timekeeping device, where the landscape itself became part of the mechanism. Inside the dark sanctuaries of Egyptian temples, a similar drama unfolded. Long, narrow corridors were not just passageways, they were carefully calibrated light shafts. On the morning of a pharaoh's coronation anniversary or a god's birthday, the rising sun would align with the temple's main axis. A beam of light would travel down the hall, cutting through the perpetual gloom to illuminate the cult statue in the inner sanctum for a few glorious minutes. In that moment, the divine statue seemed to come alive, bathed in a radiance that felt like a direct blessing from the sun god Ra. This transformation was not left to chance. It required the builders to calculate the exact angle of the sun on that one specific day of the year, and then to construct the entire temple, from its massive pylon gates to its innermost chamber, to capture that single beam. They were, in effect, freezing a celestial event in architecture. The calculations extended to the moon as well. Certain monuments tracked the lunar cycle, with light patterns designed to highlight phases of the moon, perhaps marking times for specific rituals or ceremonies tied to the night. This required an even more complex understanding, as the moon's path is less regular than the sun's. shifting over a complex 18.6-year cycle. To achieve these effects, the builders acted as masters of aperture and reflection. They used precisely sized openings, like the roof box at Newgrange, to control the width and intensity of the light beam. They polished stone surfaces to act as mirrors, bouncing light into areas that direct sunlight could never reach. They understood how to use the contrast between deep shadow and brilliant light to create maximum dramatic impact. This was architecture as celestial choreography. The building was not a static sculpture, but a dynamic stage where the sun and moon were the lead performers. The play of light and shadow was a language, telling stories of time, divinity, and cosmic order. It turned the passage of days and seasons into a visible performance within the sacred space, ensuring that the architecture itself was alive, breathing in sync with the rhythms of the sky. Sound was not just an accidental byproduct of these spaces. It was a material as carefully shaped as the stone itself. Ancient architects understood that the auditory environment could be engineered to produce specific, powerful effects on the human mind. The treasury at Petra offers a stunning example. Its elaborately carved facade, hollowed from a cliff face, acts as a natural sound amplifier. A hand clap or a spoken word at just the right spot is transformed, the structure catching specific frequencies and reflecting them back with a startling, bell-like clarity that seems to emanate from the rock itself. This was no fortunate coincidence. It was the result of a precise understanding of how sound waves interact with curved surfaces and resonant cavities. Across the ocean, visitors to the Pyramid of Kukulkan at Chichen Itza encounter a different auditory marvel. A hand clap at the base of the massive staircase is returned not as a simple echo, but as a piercing chirp that eerily mimics the call of the sacred Quetzal bird. This phenomenon occurs because the sound waves travel up the steep steps, each one reflecting the noise at a slightly different time, creating a cascading sonic effect that the builders clearly designed for. These were not just curiosities, they were integral components of the ceremonial experience, designed to inspire awe and signal the presence of the divine through the very air. Modern researchers are now uncovering an even deeper layer to this acoustic design. Using sensitive instruments, they have measured the resonant frequencies inside certain ancient chambers, like those in Maltese temples or some enclosed pyramids. They found that many of these spaces naturally vibrate at a very low frequency, around 110 Hz. This is a profoundly significant number. Scientific studies have shown that exposure to sound at this specific frequency can directly alter human brain activity. It can quiet the language centers of the brain and shift patterns toward the theta range, a state associated with deep meditation, heightened suggestibility, and vivid mental imagery. When a ritual chant or drumbeat matched this inherent frequency of the chamber, the entire room would begin to hum, the sound becoming a physical vibration that a participant could feel in their bones. This was psychoacoustic engineering on a grand scale. The architecture was quite literally tuned to guide consciousness, to open the mind to spiritual revelation during sacred rites. This sophisticated manipulation of sound reveals a blueprint that was multisensory from its very conception. The design did not stop at the visual. It accounted for the chill of the stone, the scent of incense, and above all, the power of what could be heard and, more importantly, felt. The builders were not just creating spaces to be seen. They were crafting immersive environments to be experienced with the entire body, using the invisible force of sound as a fundamental pillar of their architectural genius, challenging us to listen more closely to the silent stones. The massive stone lintel above the Lion Gate at Mycenae is a perfect example of ancient structural genius. This triangular slab of limestone, carved with two lionesses, does more than just make an imposing entrance. It demonstrates a profound understanding of load distribution. The builders intentionally left an open triangle above the lintel, a space they filled with lighter materials. This brilliant design choice redirected the immense weight of the stonework above away from the center of the lintel, channeling it downward through the massive side walls instead. This corbelled technique, where each successive layer of stone slightly overhangs the one below, created a rudimentary but incredibly effective arch, all without a single keystone. It was an intuitive application of physics, ensuring the gateway would not collapse under its own weight for millennia. Roman engineers achieved a different kind of miracle with their concrete. While our modern concrete structures often crumble after a few decades, Roman harbors submerged in the Mediterranean for 2,000 years have grown stronger. Their secret was a specific recipe and a deep, though not formally understood, knowledge of chemistry. They mixed lime and volcanic ash from Pozzuoli to create a mortar that, when exposed to seawater, triggered a remarkable chemical reaction. Seawater actually caused the formation of rare, interlocking minerals like aluminous tobamorite within the concrete, creating a crystalline structure that blocked cracks from spreading and strengthened the material over centuries. This was not a lucky accident. It was the result of generations of systematic experimentation with local materials, a long-term research and development project whose results we are only now fully appreciating with advanced electron microscopes. These innovations speak to a holistic engineering intelligence. The Mycenaeans understood macroscopic forces, how to redirect pressure and manage compressive loads through clever geometry. The Romans mastered the microscopic world, manipulating chemical reactions at a molecular level to achieve unparalleled durability. Both cultures arrived at solutions that modern engineers now study for inspiration in creating more sustainable and resilient infrastructure. The true blueprint was not just a drawing, but a complete philosophy of construction that integrated form, force, and material in a seamless, enduring whole. The very ground plan of a Hindu temple is a perfect map of the cosmos. Its central tower, the Shikara, is not just a spire reaching for the sky. It is Mount Meru, the mythic axis of the world around which all of creation revolves. The concentric courtyards and gateways that surround it are not merely walls for privacy. They chart the descending levels of reality, from the perfectly ordered divine center to the chaotic and imperfect material world at the outer edges. To walk from the main gate toward the inner sanctuary is not just a physical journey, it is a spiritual pilgrimage toward the heart of the universe. This architectural cosmology was not unique to India. In ancient Mesopotamia, the massive ziggurats rose in stepped tiers toward the heavens. Each level represented a different layer of the universe, from the earthly plane at the base to the realm of the gods at the summit. The climb up the ziggurat's steep stairways was a ritual reenactment of ascending through the cosmic order, a symbolic journey from the human world to the divine. Why go to such extraordinary lengths to build a map of the universe in stone? These structures made the abstract tangible. A farmer who could not read complex philosophical texts could still understand his place in the grand scheme of things simply by walking through the temple grounds. He existed in the outer realms, but he could see the central tower, the Axis Mundi, and know that a perfect divine order existed at the core of all things. This spatial experience was a far more powerful teaching tool than any lecture. The consistency of these designs across an entire culture reinforced a shared worldview. Every Hindu temple, from the smallest village shrine to the largest royal complex, was built on the same cosmological principles. This created a unified reality for everyone, from the king to the common laborer. The architecture itself became a constant, silent teacher. ensuring that the core beliefs of the civilization were woven into the daily fabric of life. This explains architectural choices that might otherwise seem puzzling. A specific number of steps on a staircase was not arbitrary. It corresponded to a sacred number of days in a cycle. The choice to face a building precisely east was not just for the morning light. It was to align with the path of the sun god. Even the materials used, like specific types of stone or wood, were chosen because they were associated with certain deities or cosmic elements. The building was not just a shelter for rituals, it was the ritual itself, a three-dimensional diagram that taught every visitor who they were and where they stood in the vast, ordered expanse